The advertising sign shimmered with all the colors of the rainbow, triggering painful flashes somewhere inside the skull, as if someone had cracked the head open and was now poking around in sync with the blinking, using clumsy, awkward fingers. Boalh winced and turned down a narrow side alley between the storage building and an abandoned high-rise parking lot. The alley was littered with garbage, stinking of rot and urine, but from there he could watch the vault doors without attracting attention. Boalh was mostly interested in back exit, through which the cleaners usually took out the waste and expired mats. Of course, the sign promised best contracts and unlimited shelf life at exclusive prices. But business was business. If someone ran out of contract and had no relatives or other legal representatives, then, well, nothing personal. Only business. Of course, most of the expired mats were picked up by the suppliers of the Archon Council or some other higher authority. Chances of getting even a couple of scraps from them were zilch. However, if something went spoiled, the owners of the cheap vaults would sell it to the garbage collectors, and there Boalh might have a chance. Besides, there were rumors. Word on the streets were that such vaults supposedly accidentally make a mistake once in a while, and then sell the waste on the black market. Boalh had never dealt with this particular vault, but he had no choice. He owed Lousy Tim, his dealer, nearly 3,000, and he could only expect something if he paid back at least half of it. The sorry 100 Boalh had at his disposal couldn't solve the problem. Tim would simply take it as a percentage and give Boalh a sound thrashing as a reminder. From the distance came the sickening squealing of a police siren. Boalh instinctively pulled his head into his shoulders. The contents of his skull responded to the sharp sound with another attack of pain, and tried to blend in with the ugly interior of the alley, which honestly wasn't too hard to achieve. Actually, though, he has no active warrants on him now, and he'd earned his 100 almost straight, helping old Johnson unload the van. The stuff was almost certainly stolen, but nobody talked about it out loud, and Johnson's pawn shop was practically as legal as it gets in the hood. But the cops could pick up Boalh just for kicks, under the pretext of vagrancy, and keep him in a cell until morning, until the judge came. And he couldn't afford that. Few more hours, and he'll be hit with the real shakes. And then the current headache would seem just a mildly unpleasant recuperation. This time, however, the law enforcement was obviously preoccupied with far more critical matters. A police skimmer swept past the alley, kicking up piles of dust, rotten bioplastic packs, and other debris. The siren immediately began to fade, lost in the distance behind the hum of the evening city and the sounds of never-sleeping harbor nearby. Boalh breathed a sigh of relief and peeled himself away from the wall, keeping a close eye on the side exit of the vault. It was about time for the waste to be taken out. The truck skimmer pulled up at the back door. A plastic billboard bolted on the battered receiver body, once painted canary yellow but now long since faded and covered with bulging rust stains, read, "Short-term storage, cleanup, decomposition. Malleo and Sons. Scavengers." Boalh felt a long-forgotten fiery feeling stirring deep inside him, but he suppressed it and tried to give himself a confident and independent look. It wasn't the right time for old grudges and settling scores. That was not what he had come for. The driver didn't come out of the skimmer. He had either arrived at the prearranged time or was about to call the console and summon the vault clerk. Boalh took a deep breath, stepped out of the alley, and headed for the skimmer and the side entrance. He arrived just as the door opened, and a stocky man in his 50s, wearing stained overalls, stepped out of the building. In his hand he carried a large weighty bag, the type that small flea market vendors usually carry their junk in. The big man set the bag on the sidewalk, the metal in the bag rattled, and gave Boalh a hostile look. "What do you want, buddy?" The big man's tone was calm, but not yet threatening. Boalh cheered up a little. "Excuse me, sir," he said, trying hard to keep his voice from shaking. "Would you mind selling me some of the waste? I can pay. I have the money, sir." Behind Boalh's back, the skimmer door slammed. "Trouble, Gustav." The big man made a weird sound, either a hum or a grunt. "There's a stub here. Interested in some waste. Says he'll pay." "Is that so? That's good. You can never have too much money, right?" Boalh stood frozen, afraid to move. He knew that long, lazy voice. His feet felt as if they were frozen to the dusty sidewalk, while his thoughts were frantic. Run, run, run! But he knew it was pointless. Lousy Tim stepped out from behind Boalh, bent over, unzipped the bag, and took out a cylindrical container, roughly the size and shape of a 25-ounce thermos. Several other containers gleamed in the flickering light of the advertising sign in the bag's depths. "How much are you willing to pay, bro? How much do you think a thing like this is worth?" Boalh gathered his courage and looked up. The big man in overalls was blandly grinning at Boalh. He obviously did not suspect Boalh knew Tim, and the latter, in turn, had not given away his acquaintance. One would have thought that Tim was really the driver from Malio and Sons, if such a company existed. Tim looked at the container he held in his hand, then back at Boalh. Lousy Tim was completely hairless. The head, the arms, anywhere. There was talk that it was either a genetic flaw or the result of some old radiation poisoning. Boalh didn't care about the reasons, but the look of piercing brown eyes without eyelashes frightened him to stomach cramps. "So, what's it gonna be? How much money do you have, bro?" Boalh realized there was no way to remain silent. 100, sir. I have 100 credits. It's not stolen, I promise you, sir." The big man made a series of unintelligible grunts. Boalh realized that was the sound of his laughter. 100? You're really in the money, dog. Wait a minute. I'll bring you a fresh one, hot off the presses, along with the contract. He suddenly grew serious and loomed over the shrinking Boalh. "Get out of here, you punk!" he growled. "I don't want to hear, do you understand? If I ever as much as smell your stench from afar, you'll be really sorry. Got it?" The big man's hand slipped into the pocket of his overalls. "Do you understand what I've told you, you piece of shit?" Boalh backed away, staring at the glass sphere with the clear liquid clutched in the big man's hairy fingers. "Gustav, come on, no need to be so rough." Lousy Tim's voice sounded surprisingly calm, almost indifferent. "Our friend is just... let's say he underestimated the cost of what he wanted and slightly overestimated his financial possibilities." This material. He raised his hand with the container, holding it horizontally. A blue spark flickered evenly in the middle of the bottom. Boalh was stunned. It wasn't a waste. In case of wasted material, the indicator was usually either not lit or glowed red or, at best, orange. But blue. What is going on here in the name of the 10 gates? I see you understand, Tim said, looking straight into Boalh's eyes. You won't make enough money for this stuff in 3 lifetimes. But you don't have to worry about that. You should be concerned with other, more pressing matters, like getting even on old debts. Do you get me? Boalh nodded, unable to utter a word, took a few steps backward, keeping his eyes on the big man and Tim, tripped over the rotten wooden crate, and almost fell over. The big man grunted again and hid the glass globe in his pocket. Boalh took one last look at the container in lousy Tim's hand, then turned and darted into the stinking darkness of the alley. The moment of brutal calm-down was getting closer and closer, slowly chewing up the Boalh's well-being. The headache crept from the back of his head into his temples, starting a hellish dance of red-hot nails. The painful cramps began to stiffen the leg muscles more and more often, forcing Boalh to lose the steps and fall down on the pavement, strewn with cigarette butts, syringes, and used condoms. Occasionally, the invisible giant's hand grabbed his lever and shook it, making Boalh gasp and almost faint. But in a surprising and nightmarish way, he almost didn't notice that, absorbed in one thought: blue sparks. Not a waste due to late payments or disputed and cancelled contracts. A full-price material, paid for, safe and clear. Lousy Tim was right. Boalh couldn't even imagine how much such a container could be worth on the streets. And it was another question if you can even sell it there. Most ethereal waste dealers wouldn't risk such a thing. You could gain 10 or even 20 years of federal max for trading in waste and expired products, but it was the usual risk. What the punishment for the decomposition of the blue spark could look like, Boalh suspected he didn't even want to know. It wasn't lousy Tim's hint that it was time to repay his debt that scared Boalh the most. He would survive. It wouldn't be the first time. Tim won't kill him for 3 grand. But as for that knowledge, Boalh accidentally learned something that no one should know. Why did they let him go in the first place? Maybe he should rat them out to the police, ask for witness protection and stuff. The feds should get on board with this kind of thing, because if you can spin a network of blue spark dealers, you can build a whole career on it. Boalh grinned bitterly and shook his head, annoyed at his own naivete. Who is he kidding? They won't even listen to him. Who was he? He's nobody, a lowlife, a rotting junkie. Besides, his testimony in court won't be worth a dime. He is not even human. No, he won't get any protection from the feds. They'll throw him back on the streets, and that's it. And as soon as word got out that he'd been ratting on lousy Tim, his days, no, his hours would be numbered. The cell phone rumbled in his pocket. Boalh pulled out the scratched device with cracked screen. It was Hemoth, his cousin. Boalh was surprised. Hemoth was a city hall employee and was careful not to get too close to his errant cousin. "Hello, Hem," Boalh said, trying to keep his voice steady, though it was at this point that withdrawal decided to drive a particularly long and rusty screw into his skull. "It's been a long time." "Shut up and listen," Hemoth cut him off. "I know you have a problem with Dunbal." It took Boalh a few moments to realize who his cousin was talking about. Lousy Tim's full name was Timon Dunbal. "If you don't screw it up, you've got a chance to start with a clean slate. I don't know why I'm risking my neck by leaking this information to you. Anyway, listen up. Dunbal's had it. In about..." There was a brief pause. Apparently Hemoth looked at his watch. "In about 40 minutes, his lair will be raided." "A raid?" Boalh asked in bewilderment. "How does that help me? Dunbal will be out in a month, and if he isn't, his buddies will nail me." "This isn't a police raid," Hemoth said. "Stop talking and listen. I don't have much time. Dunbal is in big trouble. There is a lot more muscle involved than the cops or even the feds. They're not gonna arrest him. This is a liquidation raid." "Blue sparks!" Boalh barely stopped himself from saying it right into the phone. Some things are best never said out loud. "Everyone close to him is also on the list," Hemoth continued. "And the street scam don't know who owes Dunbal how much, but he must have your receipts." Boalh understood. For Lousy Tim, small-time dealing was just a pastime, a hobby. He made so much money that a sorry 3,000 didn't matter. He was more interested in leashing junkies, occasionally using them to do his dirty work. The same fate was likely to befall Boalh, but things would be different if the receipts fell into a small-time street dealer's hands. For 3 grand, those petty bastards will cut him to ribbons. "What can I do?" Boalh asked. There was really no time for idle chatter. After the action, there will be some delay. The local cops are supposed to arrive at the scene in about 15 minutes. I don't know why so much. Probably to be able to make an honest report about the suspects escaped in an unknown direction," Hemoth said. "Your chance is to get there within those 15 minutes. That's all I can do. Keep in mind, if the cops catch you there, you will be the one who failed to escape. As you realize, no one's going to question you. It will be easier to present the body. And don't set the place on fire. Cops want a clean crime scene. Do you understand?" "Yes." Boalh tried frantically to straighten up his head, which was splitting with pain, fear, hope, and gloating. "I understand. Hem." "Thank you." "You're welcome." Hemoth was silent for a moment, then said in a lower tone, "This is your last chance, Bo. Don't blow it like you've blown everything else." The phone went silent. Boalh looked at the dark screen and slipped the cell back into his pocket. He wouldn't have time to get weapons, but even if he did, who was he going to fight? Raiders who could take out Lousy Tim's entire gang, a police SWAT team. He hadn't made it half a mile to Tim's headquarters when the first explosions and the crackle of automatic gunfire rang out. It had been a long time since Boalh had seen such carnage. Blood was everywhere, on the floor, on the walls, even on the ceiling. Bodies lay interspersed with broken furniture, some hanging from the windows, either trying to shoot back or to jump out and flee. Boalh knew that Tim kept the receipts in his private office. There was a safe there too, but Tim hardly ever used it. One would have to be suicidal to try to steal from Lousy Tim. Boal headed cautiously through the chaos of the main hall, careful not to step directly on bodies and into pools of blood. Not that he particularly cared, he just didn't want to leave such a colorful trail behind him. At the entrance to the office, a body in a tattered overalls lay across the threshold. Boal paused for a moment to bend over. The recent big guy from the vault. Well, Gustav, you lived like a jerk and died like one. Boal carefully hooked the lapel of Gustav's overalls with one finger and peered into the inside pocket. The transparent globe was intact. The assault rifle burst that had penetrated the big guy's body and head had passed a bit to the right. Boal exhaled a sigh of relief. It would be pretty unlucky circumstance if the whole office was splashed with holy water. Contrary to his expectations, no special treatment was given to Tim. No creepy macabre messages in the style of the drug cartels of the past. Lousy Tim was just banally shot, like all his other accomplices. A burst to the body and a bullet in the head. Of course, the bag with the containers was gone. Boal wondered whose soul the late Gustav was trying to sell to Tim, and how could such an important soul get into such a miserable hole. That was something to ponder later, though. Boal leaned over Tim's corpse and pulled out a drawer. The receipts were there, a whole pile of them carelessly dumped into a tin cigar box. Boal wanted to take the entire box, but changed his mind. Sorry, fellas, he thought, picking his receipts from the pile. I'm not really in the mood for charity runs, and I can't raise too much suspicion. If all the receipts will be gone, it could bring too much heat throughout the streets. Boal pulled out the last receipt and shoved the box back into the desk. He was about to rush out when his gaze fell on Tim's corpse. Apparently, Lousy had tried to jump to his feet at the last moment, and as he was falling back into his chair, shot several times, his shirt caught on the backrest and pulled up almost to his chin. The burst went diagonally through Tim's hairless chest. 6 bullet holes, enough to cover his entire body in blood, but Boal could still clearly see that there was nothing on Tim's chest. No cross, no pentagram tattoo, mandala, or protective symbol signifying that he had entrusted his soul to one of the guardians, or at least signed the contract with a vault, even one as shabby as the one he'd tried unsuccessfully to deal with. It was extremely rare for that to happen. After the armistice in the last war, which had actually ended with human victory, though it was not officially called that for the sake of political correctness, preferring to speak of the Great Reconciliation and the Pact of the Freedom of Post-Mortem, daredevils willing to risk their souls became a scarce breed. Any reasonable person would have preferred to sign a contract with the Guardian, who guaranteed that after death the soul of the signer would not go to the wrong hands. Like Boal's, for example. Boal grinned. It was that damned pact that had stripped him of everything and turned him into a nothing, a miserable junkie feasting on a scrap of ruined souls. No, not even scraps, but defiled garbage, to use a human analogy. For what? Because he, unlike some, did not defect to the side of the victors, but was faithful to his oath to the end. And now these traitors became the guardians, and he, Boal, was rotting away on the streets. But Tim is a different matter. His soul is not protected by the inviolable defensive bonds of the contract. Boal didn't know why the dealer hadn't taken such a natural precaution. Could it be because, by a sneaky profession, he did not trust Waltz? Boal did not know, nor did he want it to. He wanted something very different. And now he would have it. Juno jumped into the driver's seat and fired up the skimmer's engine. A second later, Mylon flopped down onto the torn-up synthetic leather of his seat, squishing the yellow foam sticking out in tufts. Within moments, the skimmer was steering down the dark, deserted street, scattering rats rummaging near the trash bins. "What the hell's going on?" Mylon grumbled, fumbling with his seatbelt. "What's the bloody rush? All out of nothing." Juno took a sharp turn at the intersection, barely missing a taxi whose blaring horn cursed him out as they flew past. Then he gunned it down straight down the road, pinning Mylon to the seat like if they were in a race bodied. "My source in the city hall gave me a tip," Juno said. "There is a good loot in the northwest 3rd district. But we gotta get there before the cops do, or they'll take it." Mylon perked up. "A waste? That would be nice. We sold our last shipment to the Dark City Council last month, and been dry after that." "Wait a minute." He looked at Juno worriedly. "Did you say Northwest 3rd? Are you out of your damn mind? The lousy got the place locked down. We so much as poke our noses in there, and they'll beat the hell out of us." "No, they won't." Juno made another turn, almost hitting some bum. "Mylon, this is a 1 in a million opportunity. My source was taking a big risk by dropping this stuff on me. Anyway, you don't have to worry about Lousy. He is the loot. Some tough guys took him and his crew out a few minutes ago." "I'll be damned," Mylon muttered. "The Lousy finally got it." Some words suddenly get through to him. "Wait, what do you mean, he's the loot? Alive, unsigned, Steve? Are you serious?" "Yeah, my source works at the registry. He's been through the database. Lousy doesn't have a contract. Do you realize how much Dark City will pay for his soul? It's not like pushing bits of waste to junkies. Totally different league. But we've got to get there before the cops. Otherwise, the Steve goes to the feds." Mylon looked at his watch and rested his hands on the front panel of the skimmer. "Go," he said shortly. 6 minutes later, they jumped out of the skimmer. No police sirens had been heard yet, but the two soul-leggers had no doubt that the place would soon be buzzing with uniformed men. They were almost unperturbed by the horrible carnage they saw as soon as they crossed the threshold. The door to Lousy's office was ajar, and some movement was visible over the lifeless body lying across the threshold. Juno pulled out a large automatic pistol. Mylon, lodging a weighty equipment bag, stepped behind the blood-splattered pool table, just in case. "Shit! Did someone beat us to it?" Juno's voice was filled with rage and despair. "No way! This loot will be ours." He stepped forward. "Hey you! Whoever you are! Drop everything and come out!" he shouted, pointing his gun at the door. "Keep it slow, and let me see your bloody hands the whole time." A short pause followed. "No problem," the deep and creepy, inhuman voice replied, and the door frame shattered, along with the large chunk of the wall. A huge clawed foot stepped over the body lying in the doorway, and the monstrous silhouette emerged through the slowly settling dust. Mylon stared in horror at the three-eyed horned head with the ghastly fanged maw, and the body lumped with the huge muscles, at the paws with long, curved, and obviously needle-sharp claws, and at the shadows of the leathery wings folded behind the figure's back. The pistol banged several times in succession, but the bullets only made teeny sparks on the monster's body and ricocheted away with a screech. The demon raised its right paw, and Milan saw the human heart pierced with one of the claws. "You can't devour our souls!" Milan shouted, tearing open his shirt collar to reveal a cross. "They are in the care of our Lord Jesus Christ! You can't get to them, you infernal scum!" Juno threw his useless weapon to the floor, crossing himself frantically and moving his lips, probably reading a prayer. The demon licked the heart from his claw with his long tongue, swallowed, and laughed. "I don't care about your pathetic souls. The Great Pact forbids me from devouring them, but you forgot something." He loomed over the pale soul-leggers. "It does not forbid me to kill you. You can deal with your lord after that." And Boalh, the flame-eyed, former commander of Lucifer's left reserve army, the last of the knights of hell who had not surrendered, who for the first time in 300 years of miserable existence had absorbed the juicy, luxurious, black soul of the hardened sinner Dunbal and restored his true form, leaped forward.